you want to listen what I think about the future of personalism. We have gone back to the roots, to the springs, to the sources. It was a kind of ressourcement. That is a French word that was used by Henri de Lubac to mean the going back to the fathers, to the Greek fathers, to the sources of Christian faith, to arrive to a reform that starts from the origins, that does not change the form, but goes back to the original form, a kind of purification. By the way, this is the same idea of Guardini. The reform starting again with the origin. But we go to the sources, we go to the origins, in order to understand what is our task in the future. What has the future in store for us? At least we should do this if we are still something living, a living reality. Aristotle says that the soul is entelecheia e prote somato physicou dunane soen ekontos. That is the first form of a physical body that has life in potency. To have life in potency does not mean that you are not alive and you will become alive tomorrow. No. It means that you are alive, but that you have still more life in front of you, that you will grow in life. We are not a physical body. In this sense, the soul of the personalist movement is an analogy, but I think it is a pregnant analogy. Are we a community, a spiritual community, that is heading towards the future? And what is this future? Do we still have life in us? Well, as our friend Mark Roberts explained to us the day before yesterday, we three do not have much life waiting for us. He explained to us we are old, and you must take care of the future. You must write your testament. But what is the life of the personalist movement? That's you. We have a little bit of life waiting for us, but you have many, many years of fruitful human experience in front of you. What can we tell you, we old people who have fought the battles of personalism in the 80s, in the 90s, and up to now? Well, first of all, I think it is the problem of a method. I think we should work on method. Method means the way towards. And there are many methods. And the first sense of the word method, I think, regards the education. We live in an educational crisis in the United States and in Europe. First Cardinal Ratzinger, then Pope Benedict XVI spoke about the urgency of an educational crisis. And the problem, he said, was a problem of witnesses. And here, let me say a few words on phenomenology. I think phenomenology should be a method of going back to yourself. Zurück zu den Sachen selbst. Back to the things themselves. But the first thing that is the object of this going back is your own person. In this sense, there is a term that has been given by Wojtyła, and I think also by Hildebrand, to the idea of phenomenology. Not just a going back to the things themselves, but to go back to that thing that is yourself. And there is a different kind of epoche, a little bit different from the classical meaning of epoche. Correlated but different. To put within brackets all what you think you know, all what you have heard in your environment, all what comes from the outside. To let your human experience speak. To become attentive to what you really are. to what the real given in your life is, to what the real fundamental demands of your heart are, and what the first logical evidences of your mind are. In one sense, there is a first ascetic moment in which you learn to go back to yourself. And then there is a turn towards the world outside of you. The word of the, Heidegger says, the men's act. People say, when phenomenology wants to bring you back to yourself, this does not mean that the world of the others is meaningless. No, it means that only starting with these fundamental evidences and demands of your soul, you can understand the world outside you. And then life becomes a learning process. There are people who learn reading books, and you must read a lot of books. Most of you, many of you, want to make a career as teachers in different fields, and erudition is fundamental. You must not imagine that you can do without knowing the past. There is a fundamental sin in scientific research that is identified by the medievals with the words ignoratio elenchi. You imagine you are discovering something that has been discovered many years before you, and you attribute to others opinions that are not their opinions, so you have to read a lot. But the specific of the phenomenological method is that not only books become the text that you read, reality is the text. Books are important, are a part of reality, and they help to understand reality. But whatever you do should be measured, confronted with the evidences and the demands of your heart, so that your knowledge grows together with your life. Life is a learning process. If I must say, what I think is the greatest defect of our educational system, I think this is that this educational system, first, does not bring you back to yourself. Second, as a consequence, does not teach you to go back to the empirical world with the method that allows you to systematize, to really understand, to penetrate the experience that you live. And then you do not live really. People live on the surface. They never go to the depth of themselves, and they do not succeed in re-understanding, reorganizing the world, in understanding the world. They do not understand themselves, and they do not understand the world. And then they live confused lives in a world that becomes more and more irrational. Irrational in the sense not corresponding to the true demands of the human heart. What does this mean for a cultural program? I think that we should turn our attentions to pedagogy and to the problem of helping young people to reach their interiority and grow in their maturity. I've had the occasion to talk to a couple of you who are teaching literature. Literature is one of the fundamental instruments of reaching this result, of helping people to go back to themselves and to understand the world. But of course, we should ask the question, what is the method of literature? By the way, perhaps we should add to the pantheon of the realist phenomenology the name of Roman Ingarden. He has written some valuable works exactly on this point, on what is the work of art, on the understanding of the work of art. It does not really arrive to a methodology of the teaching of literature and of the teaching of the arts and of the history of the arts, but it comes near to that. And if anybody wanted to enter into this domain, he could provide for a starting point. Not only him, there are others, of course. And this is one point. What is the future? I think the future requires us a concentration on method, on education, and on those branches through which education becomes active. I think literature and art are the first fundamental field of action. And this implies that we resist the risk of closing ourselves into the first stage. We go to the essences. There is a second stage, it is the stage in which you go back to the world. And the first part of this movement towards the world, I think, is just art and literature. By the way, one book that I've been considering in these last years more and more is that of Husserl on the crisis of European sciences. It is a kind of, it could also have the title, The Crisis of Phenomenology, because Husserl spends the first part of his life with one conviction: we must make philosophy as a strenge Wissenschaft, a rigorous science. And the ideal of the rigorous science for him is undisputable. How could anybody wish to live in a world that is not the world of rigorous science? And then he sees these new tremendous movements growing, communism, socialism. They live out of myths, not of science. And for the first time, the question arises, why should somebody accept the ideal of rigorous science? What comes before science? What comes before science is the Lebenswelt, the world of life, the everyday world. That is the world in which we live, not the world of rigorous science. Does this mean that the ideal of rigorous science loses its meaning, loses its weight? No, but it has to be justified. The rigorous science is the instrument to become the real subject of my life world. And that is the problem that we have today. In one sense, I think that realist phenomenology and personalism should come to grips with the problems that Husserl faces in the crisis of the European sciences. And we should make the same turn with a different background, the background of realism and personalism that is not exactly the background of transcendentalism that was considered as proper to his phenomenology by the late Husserl. Although in the crisis, there is something new in relation to the purely transcendental phenomenology. So this means, first of all, a concentration on the education, literature, art, and forgive me, but I've spent a large part of my life making politics, and I shall add politics. We need political leaders. We need people who understand, before being political leaders, who can be citizens. To be a citizen means to understand that we are responsible not only for the actions that we commit by ourselves alone, but also with those that we perform together with others. And not only those we perform together with my wife, my children, my family, no. As a nation, we bear a responsibility for the works that are done in our name, for the good that is not done in our name. We have a political responsibility to help to grow a civic consciousness, a political consciousness. I think this is one of the great challenges. I have already said that the crisis of the European sciences is the result of tremendous populist movements in the Europe of the 20s, 30s. If you look around you, you see that similar movements are developing today in our countries. In Italy now, there is a polemics on the translation of Mein Kampf. Mein Kampf is the major work of Adolf Hitler. And now it has been translated in Italy with a new translation. We had an old translation, of course, of the 30s, but now we have a new translation, and this has been widely spread. And some say, no, we should not do that. I have mixed feelings. I wrote an article. In this article, I say, well, look, I am full of fear and full of hope. If you read Mein Kampf, what do you find? You find that, I could formulate it a little bit abruptly, we are all national socialists without knowing. What are the main currents that enter into national socialism? Darwinism. I have nothing against Darwinism as a scientific theory. But what is taught in our school is not a theory of biology. It's a general vision of reality. It's a metaphysics, an evolutionist metaphysics that has only limited relations to the scientific theory of Darwin and cannot be considered as a logical necessary consequences of the scientific theory. But what is taught is a metaphysics and also a social philosophy. It is the metaphysics and the social philosophy of Adolf Hitler. And if we become aware of this, perhaps there is a reaction. We understand we are going in the wrong direction. Perhaps, on the contrary, many people will say, yes, we are national socialists. We did not know. Now we do know, and we are happy with it. It's possible. That's the fear. That's the danger. We live in a society in which Darwinism has become not a scientific theory that I respect and I might accept if I did understand enough of biology to have a meaningful opinion on this. It has become a metaphysics, a philosophy. And what is the other great stream that enters into national socialism? It is Nietzsche. Well, I have read Nietzsche. I know the current interpretations. I agree with the new interpretation of Nietzsche. Nietzsche is not only a source of national socialism. Nietzsche has many sides. But one of these sides leads us to national socialism. And that is the side that today is the most popular. When you read postmodernism, to a large extent what you find is there is no truth. Everybody constitutes his own truth and does not constitute his own truth on the basis of an original gift of God. No, arbitrarily. And that's the reason why we don't want laws. Laws implies that we bow to a truth that stands higher than us. And in national socialism, the law is the enemy. This is a bit contradictory with the usual vision that we have of national socialism. All the Germans who stand on attention and no. At the core of national socialism is the revolt against the law. And the law is substituted through the personal relation to the Führer. What is the cause of our unity? A natural law? No. The fact that we have the same blood and that we accept the same Führer. And the law, that is the Jews, the law of the Jews. And the Jews are persecuted because they are the people of the law. And the German spirit, that is the sentiment of infinity, is freedom. Freedom that binds itself through an act of fealty, of obedience to the leader. We have not much of acts of fealty and obedience to the leader, but very much of revolt against the law. And tomorrow, the other stage of national socialism ideology could come. I do not mean really that we are national socialists. I mean that the ideology of our time has many elements corresponding to National Socialism and may lead to a form of totalitarianism, not the same, a different form of totalitarianism. And I think that this is one of the tasks that stands in front of us, to take a stand in this cultural struggle, to make clear the values that are at stake. Also, in this struggle that stands in front of us, in front of this populist movement that are growing and might become new forms of totalitarianism. It is not a given that they will become, they might become. You cannot just clash with them. You must ask the question, why do the people go after these myths? What is the source from which they draw their tremendous power? And these sources are emotional sources that are not led by reason towards their true and relational aim, but are distorted. And since they cannot find the road towards the true aim, they can easily be brought to wrong ends. When you look at a society in which so many people cannot get married and make a family, what is the new word that each one of us constructs? What is the great revolution in which you shape a new world? That's when you fall in love and you make your family. But now people do not make families. Do not make families because, the current analysis, because they do not find a job, that's true. We should have more jobs for young people. Because they don't find a home, that's true. We should build more homes for young people. But that's not the first route. The problem is that nobody tells them that it is worthwhile. Nobody transmits the idea of becoming a family father or a family mother as the great adventure of life. Much more interesting, much better than any Hollywood movie you can watch. People are not investing in their own lives, and then they become ready to invest in myths. And now the myths are mainly the myths of the business show, the show business, excuse me. But tomorrow they might become the myths of the political show. And you already see this. There is a mixture of styles. The styles of the business, of the show business are brought into politics, and politicians become actors. It may happen that an actor, a not very good actor, becomes a great politician. It is the case of Ronald Reagan, but it happens once in 1,000 years. Now you have this mixture of styles. And the first point is that people do not invest their energies in their own lives. They do not make families. They do not love the work they have. They do not invest in creating skills that allow them to enter into the creative job for which they are made. And well, all this, I think, should be something that stands in our preoccupation. How can we orient the passions, the passional forces that constitute each one of us towards the proper end? I think we should consider more the problem of phenomenology, personalism, as the methodology of human sciences. We said a few words yesterday on the methodology of economics, but there is the methodology of sociology. And here we have some allies that we very often do not consider, because a large part of modern sociology, the best part of modern sociology, has strong phenomenological and personalistic roots. I think of Schutz, I think of Peter Berger, I think of Luhmann, I think of Luhmann. They all had developed their ideas in a kind of in the case of Schutz, consciously phenomenological method. In the case of the others, more a semi-phenomenological atmosphere than really a phenomenological method. And we should become aware of the richness of this method and make more contacts, and also give a contribution to deepen the methodology of the sciences. So often, we, in the social, cultural, political debate, meet people who tell us, oh no, you cannot say that, because science said something else. And we should be aware of the fact that science is a human action. And science, especially social sciences, are philosophical sciences. And their results are dependent upon their methodology. And if some values are excluded in the beginning in the methodology, you will not find them in the results. It is not possible. And then you have to work on the methodology to create a methodology that is capable of seeing the values that are at stake in the different domains of this science. But this is a philosophical work. And to a large extent, it is a philosophical work to be made. And to a large extent, it's not a philosophical work that we will do. We are, well, perhaps too old, not because I think that we are bound to die tomorrow, as our friend Mark Roberts seems to imply, but because, well, we have acquired the habits of the years of our formation, and it is difficult to be so flexible that you easily enter into these new fields. But we can help to give to young scholars the method that allows them to do these things. And we can be a kind of accompaniment, of support for them if they want to develop a phenomenological or personalistic method of literary criticism. When we say literature, literary criticism is today one of the fields in which the battle for the formation of the mind of new generation is fought. And on the one hand, we have an elaborated deconstructionist method. On the other hand, those who have a different and deeper understanding of the text, a deeper contact with the text, very often they have no methodology. And the same holds true in the different other fields that I quoted. So if I were to leave a heritage to the young generation, that would be aware. Personalism is not the repetition of what old personalists have said. It is not even the search for other authors who have said the same things. Personalism is, yes, you must read old authors, you must gain erudition. History of philosophy is important. Here I know that not all phenomenologists share my opinion. It is important. It is necessary, but it is an instrument. You must enter into new fields. And you must have, and you can do that only if you first learn personalism and phenomenology as the method of your life, the method through which your life becomes a learning process. Because the source of geniality, of novelty, is always the direct contact with reality. And the direct contact with reality begins in your heart. In this sense, the discovery of the heart in the philosophy of von Hildebrand contains an enormous potentiality that has developed only to a very limited extent.